a number of these characters that are described here being prayerful toward God, and how God responds to them in that way. Okay? So as we begin into looking at the actual text of this, you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to read all these genealogies to you. I figure you can read them yourself. I am going to make a few points off of them. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of these names here that, frankly, I'm not sure I'm willing to try. And I'll leave it to you to read them. But you're going to see a lot of lists of family names. And we begin to ask ourselves why these lists of family names. Well, again, these folks are trying to reestablish themselves as the nation of Israel. And for them, they're trying to reestablish themselves as who belongs to the nation. And it's the same sort of thing that we might do. If you imagine this country is suddenly overrun, and then 70 years later, our descendants are coming back and trying to reestablish, what tools would they use? What information would they try to gain to know who was a citizen of the United States versus who was not a citizen of the United States? And of course, you can read in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. And if you read there, you'll find out that there were folks who were claiming to be Israelites who were not. And Ezra and Nehemiah, if you remember, were doing a careful search of the texts that they had to find out who was legitimately a member of the Israelites and who was not. And there was even some that were trying to claim to be in the priesthood who were not. And you might remember that those accounts. And so here is Ezra, who's looking through these lineages, and they're trying to figure out, okay, who is legitimately of one of the tribes of Israel and who is not. And so that's here. He gets all the way back with the book with Adam. He's talking the first couple of verses. Adam, Seth, the first word here. Adam, the name of the first man. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Ahaliel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So he takes us in these first few verses all the way down through Noah and Noah's sons. And what do we establish there? We establish that here's this lineage of these men from the very beginning of the human race. And I would also point out to you, this is not presented as if it were some metaphor, as if it were some mythology or even legend. No, the author writes of these men as, these are the first men. Here they are. And so the apologists, or those who would try to dispute the Bible, and especially the book of Genesis, and try to say, oh, well, the whole story about Adam and the whole story about all of these men, this was just metaphor, or this was just these were just legendary figures that were mentioned here that really didn't exist, but God or this story was given or created as an explanation for the beginning of mankind, because these simple tribesmen didn't know any better. No, the writer of Chronicles, Ezra, we know from history, was an educated man and a member of one of the most powerful nations on the earth at this time. The Persians, as we know, ruled from Egypt all the way to India. And so to suggest that somehow this was some backward fellow who didn't know up from down, no, this is not the case. This was an educated, learned man, and yet he writes here not as if this was a legend, not as if this was some sort of mythology, but no, just as a simple statement of fact. Here's this opening lineage, and what is his point here? The point here is the whole lineage of mankind here. we're going to establish the whole lineage of mankind, and now we're going to focus in on particular lines going to us. And we could, to us, the Jews, that is, but we, Christians, we can kind of do the same thing. Most of us, recognize we are descendants of Jephthah, and we'll find that. The author uses both a linear, what's called a linear, and a segmented genealogy. And if you're familiar with lineages, if you've gone on to some of the ancestry sites on the internet, you know what that looks like. The lineage, you can trace your family line, father to son, or mother to daughter, down a family tree. But you also do maybe segmented lines where you branch out and you look at, hey, here's this person who had all these brothers and sisters, and this person married into that family, and this person had these children. And so you see that branching off that comes off of those direct lines. You see those branches and various side lines, and that's a segmented genealogy. And so the author here of Chronicles is going to use both of those, showing the direct lines, father to son, but then occasionally going to branch out, showing brothers, siblings, and other members of the family to show how they're all interrelated. They're all connected. He follows a linear succession to Noah, and then from Noah, now he's going to do the branching, showing the siblings. Here's Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and now he's going to show the lineages of each one of those family lines. Descendants of Japheth become the nations that were primarily to the north and west of Israel, and you see that again. I'm not going to try and read all these names, but just to point out that the writer here puts them in their geographic locations. Descendants of Japheth were primarily north and west. These were up around the Caspian Sea. They were up along the coast of the northern coasts of the Mediterranean, up into Turkey. They ultimately became the nations that settled up there. And if you know your world history, you'll know that a lot of those folks migrated west and ultimately became the nations of the the Germans and so forth, and those nations that we know to the west. And so that's the descendants of Japheth. The descendants of Ham went primarily to the south and became like the Cush and the Egyptians. And those folks that were down in Africa, those folks who were down in the northern seacoast of Africa along the Mediterranean, and they also went down towards the western coast. The eastern coast of Africa, along that part of the world, and then we see then the descendants of Shem, which was of course of more immediate interest to this author because of his descendants from Shem. They settled down to the east and to the southeast of the nation of where the Israelites were now located, and became those nations in Arabia and in Mesopotamia and those areas. Occasionally, we're going to see the author is going to interject a commentary point. We see that in verse 10, for example. Here, we see as he describes Cush became the father of Nimrod, and now he interjects a little comment. He became a mighty one in the earth. Nimrod becomes a mighty one. What do we associate with Nimrod? If I remember right, I think he was associated with the construction of the Tower of Babel. But I may be mistaken. I might have to check that out. I believe he might have been connected, but apparently he was an early ruler in some way. And yes. Yes. So yeah, associated with Babylon, and that whole Mesopotamian area, of course, became known as the cradle of civilization, and Nimrod was apparently an early leader of this. Um, then we get into starting in verse 28, the descendants of Abraham. We finally get down to from Shem, verse 24, Shem, and then verse 27 we get Abram. We get verse 26, Sarah, Nahor, Terah. Terah, of course, is the father of Abraham, and then Abram, and that is Abraham. So we interject that little comment there and just sort of point out, oh, here's the father of all the Israelites, Abraham. We're all descendants. We're all children of Abraham. Remember? And now he goes into the descendants of Abraham. The descendants of Abraham are Isaac and Ishmael. These are genealogies, and he starts naming the genealogies of all of these guys, and points out that Abraham had a concubine named Keturah, and she bore, and notice the names: Zimran, Jokshan, Eden, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Well, we know that the Medians and the Midianites were some of the tribes there around Israel who were, in fact, occasionally fairly bitter enemies of the Israelites. Guess what? They're all related. They're all related to one another. The Midianites could trace their lineage back to Abraham, and so you begin to understand that a lot of times these wars that they're having with some of these surrounding tribes, these are family feuds, if you will, from different lines of the same family. Here's Abraham's children through Isaac fighting with Abraham's children through Keturah, and so we see that, and we begin to see that interaction. And I think that's the point here that the author of Chronicles is making, is that we are effectively in fighting with our own kin, if you will. He goes on then to describe in some detail, starting in verse 34, Abraham became the father of Isaac. The sons of Isaac were Esau and Israel. So now we're going to go again. We're doing that branching now. We're showing the siblings. Here's Esau and Isaac, and what do we see there? The sons. Now he's going to focus on the sons of Esau. Why? Because Esau was the founder of the nation of Edom, which was to Israel's immediate kind of east and south, was the kingdom of Edom. They were occasionally allies and more frequently enemies of Israel, and we find out here though that they begin to set up kingdoms in verse 43. Now these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king of the sons of Israel reigned. Where did Israel get the idea we want kings like the other nations around us? Where did they get that idea? Maybe from Edom. They see the kings of, Edom's got kings. Why don't we have kings? And again, they're all related, because here's Edom through Esau, again, a son of, if you will, a son of Isaac, back through Abraham, and yet, they are not the children of the promise. Jacob was. And so, but again, we see the relationship between the two nations, all of them related through the same family line, and explaining how they're all related through the same family line. And we see that, again, why go through all the nations of Edom? Well, apparently the author felt that it was important for them to understand who was related through Edom or through Esau, and who was related through Jacob. Because now we go into the second chapter, and unless you got comments on the first, by all means, don't stop me if you got a comment on that first chapter. Like I said, I'm not going to read all these names. I'll make you guys read all these. I'll make you guys read all these names. Yeah. Is it? Okay, I did not know that. Thank you. Shortest verse in the Old Testament is the first verse of Chronicles. First Chronicles. I did not know that. Yeah, you got those three names. You got 12 letters. About 12 letters long. I did not know that. That's an interesting fact. But yeah, you begin to you start seeing these lineages, and you're going, why would anybody care about these lineages? Well, again, they're trying to figure out who belongs to who, and see how their history interweaves with the history of those around them. So now we get into Chronicles, the second chapter. Now we get the genealogy of the sons of Israel. Now we're going to focus on the 12 tribes of Israel, starting here with Jacob, and you've got, now you're going to track through this lineage all the way through these various sons, and the purpose here is to show the lineage of David, because we want to show David is of the tribe of Judah via Perez. Is it Perez or Perez? I don't know how it's named, exactly pronounced. But the fact is here is David's lineage established through Judah as a son of Jacob. And you see some of these other branches that come off. And why does Ezra identify these various branches? Well, because they contain the names of certain key players in what's going to happen with the temple and with the priesthood and with various components of their history. Okay. So you see here, we've got sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So he names the brothers that we know about from the latter books of Genesis, and then he begins to trace through the lineage of Judah. Notice he focuses in verse 3 now. He's going to focus on Judah. He points out that a little bit of the family scandal here, where Judah had children by his daughter-in-law Tamar, and we again remember that story from Genesis, where Tamar was supposed to have been given to, yes, sir. Oh, well, thank you. Yes, that does look short. We stand corrected. Thank you. There's a match in Job. Okay, very good. Yes, that's critical to know, John. Thank you. He said the shortest verse in the Old Testament is not Chronicles 1 verse 1, it is Chronicles 1 verse 25. 25, and there will be a quiz on this later. This will be on the test. This will be on the test that will be given at the end of class here. So yes, thank you. Again, we start to identify some of these key players. Why? Because again, they're trying to reestablish, they're trying to rebuild themselves. So they start mentioning some of the key folks that are involved. Here's Zerah, who's identified as a brother to Perez. Why do we care about Zerah? Well, a lot of Zerah's descendants were the singers. They were the musicians for the temple, and so you wanted to know who were the someone claims to be a musician of the temple. Well, let's check the genealogy. Let's see if you're in the genealogy here. And here is Achan mentioned, verse 7. I think here it's spelled in my Bible Akar. That's just a variation spelling. But it says here the son of Carmi was Akar, the troubler of Israel, who violated the ban. So here we see his lineage and him mentioned as a reminder, as a historical reminder of what had happened, and that's recorded, of course, over the book of Joshua. Now we get into the descendants of David, the genealogies of David, and seeing his family line, and noting that here's a man named Caleb in verse 18. Now, this Caleb, though, that's mentioned here is not the same man who helped spy out Canaan with Joshua. This is a different Caleb, so you can understand some of the, especially for a modern reader, some of the confusion we might run into as we try to read this book. We're going to see various men named Caleb, various men with the same name, and it would be, again, like reading U.S. history, and if we only had first names, and we were referring to various men named John, well, here's John Adams, or here's John Smith, or here's, various other historical figures all named John. The confusion that we might get into, unless we knew the context and we knew the lineage of the man, and that which we don't necessarily have, but these folks were familiar with this. These folks this would have been very important to them, and they would have been tracking this. We find that these genealogies in these texts parallel the same information that we find in the book of Genesis, in the book of Numbers, in the book of Joshua, and in the book of Ruth. We find the very same material in these books, and so we can kind of track through these genealogies to see who belongs to who. Again, they may seem obscure to us, very obscure and very repetitious and very dull, frankly, to a modern reader, but to the Hebrews, these were vital. This was vital information of knowing who really belonged to the nation of Israel. We may compare this to the genealogies that we have in the books of Matthew and Luke. You remember that whole opening of Matthew is a lineage, contains all those begats and so forth. That lineage down to Jesus Christ. Why is that there? Why does anybody care about the lineage of Jesus Christ? Huh? Proof. Proof of what? Proof of who he is. Proof that, first of all, he was a Jew, and second of all, that he was of the tribe of Judah, and thirdly, of the line of David. There was a lot of prophecy regarding the Messiah, that the Messiah was going to be, of the tribe of Judah. He was going to be of the line of David. There were a lot of prophecies about that, and that was proof. That was proof that yes, Jesus met that requirement. You might remember the passage, and I forgot to write it down. I meant to write it down, but one of you perhaps could look it up for me. That passage that the Hebrews, or I'm sorry, I think it was the Pharisees that were scoffing and saying, does anything good come out of Galilee? And he said, search the scriptures and see that nothing good comes out of Galilee. There is that passage. Well, why were they saying that? They knew the prophecies. They knew the lineages that were supposed to be of the Messiah. And if Jesus didn't establish, as Louise points out, if he didn't prove his lineage with these genealogies, and of course these guys are going to be checking these, they're going to check that book of Matthew and make sure that lineage, that genealogy lines up with the other genealogies that they've got. And if it doesn't, then there's a big issue. And that's why they also give the one in Luke. So you notice the one in Luke and the one in Matthew are not the same. Why are they not the same? I had an argument online with a guy about this one time. Why are those two genealogies not the same? That's correct. One is for Mary and one is for... Why would you give two genealogies like that? Huh? Yeah, to show the genealogy line was the argument can be made, was Jesus really the son of Joseph? Biologically? No. No, he was not. And so if I was trying to prove the genealogy, if I was trying to prove the genealogy of Jesus through Joseph, somebody could easily raise the point, wait a minute, he's not really the son of Joseph. But he was really the son of Mary. No question there. Was Mary a descendant of David? Yes. That genealogy in Luke proves she was a descendant of David, too. And so, in effect, God was covering all the bases there to make sure that that genealogy proved what it was supposed to prove. All right, I'm going to stop there. We'll continue in Chronicles 3. Well, next week, I will be out, and so it'll be somebody, John or Bill or Ronnie. I guess you guys can do rock, paper, scissors on deciding who's gonna run the class next week. Arm wrestle or whatever you guys choose to do. Yes.
Is there a background there, or is that white?
That's a background. That's a picture of the temple.
Do me a favor.
What?
Make it white.